Welcome back to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3. We are here with Holly Wasson, the Chief Marketing Officer of Capital Investment Advisors, and Trip joined us. He hit some traffic, as Atlanta tends to do, but Trip's here now, so we're gonna dive into this. So first off, Trip, it's been a while, but how you doing?
I'm doing well. New Year, same thing with Atlanta traffic, right? So
I don't know why people are still surprised. I feel like that excuse should be ripped up and thrown out in the garbage. Like, it's gonna always take longer than you think. Rule 1: never leave the highway. I don't care what anyone says. The second you leave the highway, it always takes longer for whatever reason. So stay on the highway and have a car seat in your car with a stuffed animal in it that looks like a child, and you're always good.
You're taking me back to my days in LA 30 years ago. So, you know.
Or now, or what I do every day that I drive. And I have 2 car seats, but that's a different story. All right. So, Holly, we talked about Turner. And I think it's great because in the couple of 100 episodes we've done, I don't think we've had that conversation of what made Turner special. So I'm glad that we had it. So let's do a quick fast forward. So let's get from leaving Turner to Capital Investment Advisors, talk about the middle, because talk about another heritage brand of SunTrust.
Absolutely. Well, in the middle, jumping out of Turner, I was at Edelman for a stint here in the Atlanta office, running their consumer marketing team, and then had the opportunity to come over to SunTrust because they were opening up this beautiful ballpark right here, and they were going through a rebrand. So I got to work with SunTrust with rebranding to Confidence Starts Here, doing a lot of fun, changing some of our media, moving a little less out of home, a little more Pinterest. So super interesting that people like to pin things they dream of in a dream house. Great place to advertise mortgages.
Yep.
And after SunTrust,
cool. Let's pause for 1 second.
Sure.
One thing that's really important here, when you're talking of a bank and a company of that scale, okay, you joke about, hey, we changed it. Talk about the glacial pace and talk about how hard movement is. I remember, so as the SunTrust to Truist transition was happening was when we were really involved. And I remember sitting on brand demos and seeing why the color Truist purple existed and the T and the T. And I'm talking like excruciatingly detailed stuff in the color platforms and how the brand guide. So I know that you brought in, but talk about just in the big company that size, leading a brand marketing team of that size, talk about how much goes into making those decisions.
Well, I will say it was a big transition for me to go from 17 years in media.
And just we gotta move fast.
We moved fast, and it was literally part of what we did every day was move fast and make decisions quickly. To going to a regulated industry.
Yeah.
And
the only regulation on TNT is don't say fuck.
And I will say they let it slip. I do know we've aired a couple of things that they accidentally aired the wrong version and let it slip a couple times. So
it's just a slap on the wrist.
Yes. So it was a big transition in my career, I will say, to learn that pace, to learn what the bankers, were interested in with marketing. And I think this is where I got really good at being able to show ROI, to account for every penny we spent. And you're right, the brand team that was working on the colors here and what everything looks like, it was amazing the layers of brand standards they went through and the groups of people who looked at it. And I wasn't used to everything going as high up as the president at Turner.
Well, the analysis and over-analysis, because I did spin-offs, I did rebrands, names, logos, all that. And at times it's almost paralysis by analysis for them.
I agree. And I don't want to say anything bad about SunTrust. I just think it was the industry going from a media company to
It's also just the size of the company.
Yes.
Any company that you deal with of that size, we put it this way, when you get to brand guides that have more than 20 pages, that there's bureaucracy and there's things that have to be changed, and the social media departments don't talk to the website departments. So everybody's putting these checks and balances in place that all they do is delay the pace, which is hard because, like you said, Turner was moving at a lightning change of pace. Now, the financial industry, if you look, has not changed that much in 50 years. Really, even more than that, for a reason. But at the same time, you're talking about hundreds of millions and billions of dollars that are being exchanged. Like, brand messaging is incredibly important. The trust is important because if you break it, Wells Fargo, it is really hard to get those things back.
Well, and it's not at Turner, we were pushing content out. The difference with SunTrust and why you need that, big brand book is not only that we have the huge website, which was the door to all of your accounts, we had brick and mortar.
Yeah.
We have all of the materials that everyone who does business with the bank was getting, from your checking account to your mortgage to
everybody had the polo on or the logo on their shirts. It's got to look the same in West Virginia that it does in California.
Absolutely.
In that scale, I know SunTrust wasn't there, but every branch you serve has to look the same, and that's one of the reasons someone like McDonald's has been so successful, right? Even if you're in a foreign country, you have the feeding for it because it's comfort, it's normal, it's regular.
But I think in any really broad consumer business, I'm curious. I mean, we used to have this adage of think global, which is the bring standards, consistency, but act local. And if I would think across the entire, what is now Truist footprint, there has to be local actions, local identity, and things like that as far as on the consumer interaction standpoint.
I would say at SunTrust, the way that we did that, I mean, for example, here in Atlanta, opening up SunTrust Park. So that was very local. The relationship with the Braves, the things we even did here.
That's why we have business. I mean, 680, we had that pitch. We said, you can just put a big billboard up on a stadium. What are you going to do with it? And we luckily were in front of Bill Rogers, said, tell me more. And we got a big account because they really wanted to localize it. And just on that point, and I don't want to belabor this point at all, but like the second after the merger that Truist left Atlanta, they went from being number 1 to now number 3 in this market. So that is a very underrated, powerful tool that if you mess it up, I don't imagine anybody in Truist ever expected or wanted to lose number 1 of probably the most important growth market in this country right now. So it just goes to show how important that local focus is and how many companies get. I also think it's cyclical. Like the beer money, for example, it was very local for a long time, and then they went all these mega national campaigns, and like, that's not working. So then they come local, but those ebbs and flows always happen. It's a natural progression. It probably follows economic patterns closely than I'm actually giving credit to, but it's an important point. So on that note, talk a little bit now. Let's go to Capital Investment Advisor.
Okay,
Because you saw what the big looks like. Okay, you saw the big guys. So talk a little bit about how you were recruited for the role, why you took the role. I mean, 18 months is 10 minutes in the scope of business and how fast it moves. So talk a little bit about how that all set you up.
Well, I will definitely say what came between SunTrust and Capital Investment Advisors was one of the reasons I was recruited. I left SunTrust. Unfortunately, my father got sick and I was on the road a lot, and I wanted to be a little closer to home. So I joined a brilliant founder, Stephanie Nadia Olson, who started We Are Rosie, which was a startup. So I went from these giant companies to a startup. And the purpose of We Are Rosie was to all the, especially women who were jumping out of the media and advertising industry because it wasn't conducive to raising families. We had all this talent leaving. So We Are Rosie became a fractional talent agency where we worked with some of the biggest brands in the world and would put together entire ad teams that were freelancers together. So we were working with Walmart and Google and Facebook, and it was amazing.
Yeah. And probably project-based a lot of these times, right? They had project-based because that's what tends to be what slips through the cracks. They have projects. The agency's already overburdened. Their in-house team can't handle it. So they put out these projects, which sometimes turn out to be bigger campaigns than the main campaigns they're running.
Absolutely. So I had that startup strength, which was amazing. It was a mission-based company. I really loved doing it. And after 4 years and all the hard work of the team, we were able to sell to a PE firm, which was fantastic. And that is when Capital Investment Advisors came in. I think I had the background of both the big company as well as the scrappiness of a startup. And Capital Investment Advisors, they'd been in Atlanta since 1996 when Mike Reiner founded the wealth management firm. And they had begun to expand. So they were in Tampa, Dallas, Denver, and Phoenix, and they were known for their content. So we have Wes Moss, one of our managing partners. He does the Money Matters radio show on WSB. He's got a podcast. He also is on Clark Howard often and writes Forbes articles. So we had all of this amazing content, but they had never had true marketing to push that content. So I came on board to help usher them into more of a marketing phase, especially because we were so well known in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And they were looking for that foothold in their other markets, speaking of taking local.
Yeah.
And so we went into the digital age of how do
Holly,
we
take what
recruit
you've
people.
built over 10 years in Atlanta and try to do it in 10 days in Dallas.
They had built this in 30 years
30
almost
years.
in
Take
Atlanta.
what you built in 30 years. You have 4 months. Get it going.
Yeah. Why aren't we number 2 yet?
I don't understand. How come he's not on every TV show? The most popular station, the most popular guy. I don't get it.
So it was a great opportunity because this is such a family-friendly, mission-based wealth management firm. Because as we were talking earlier, when you walk in, advisors don't say, how much money do you have for retirement? They say, what do you want to do in retirement? Right. What does your happy retirement look like? And they start planning from there. So it was an amazing opportunity. I was so impressed with the amount of content. I think content is the hardest part of getting that. They had that down. So then it was just going in and, adding some digital marketing, amplifying that content.
Content, you can't train somebody to do content. You can't train somebody to do these things. That's one of the things Tripp and I talk about all the time. First of all, if you think you're going to do content and be good on day one, just don't even start trying. Like, if you're not going to do this 200-300 times, get it out of the way, take criticism, listen to yourself, don't listen to yourself, then don't do it. So I agree with you. You cannot train someone to do content. But once you have good content, it lives forever. Right. It is for SEO. It is for thought leadership. It is for spurts. And so once you start realizing that, it's insane.
Well, I think Nick and I probably have our opinions, but when you see content that doesn't connect, what are the watch outs that you see often that's poorly generated content?
Well, I don't think you should generate content just for content's sake. You have to have a reason for it. Right. And I compare that to a shiny new object where I think marketers fail in a lot of different mediums. You have to have a reason you're doing it, and you have to have a message, and it does have to connect back to your brand. So I think when you fail is when you're just like, oh, everybody has a podcast, let's make a podcast. I don't think people understand what it takes, the work behind a podcast. I know you do.
We do.
But I watch how hard our content team works week in and week out.
Too. You only see the manifestation of it when you either stop or you reach a critical mass, and you never reach critical mass, because what happens is you just get more ambitious. You're like, wait a second, what is this TikTok thing? Wait, how did I just get this many views? Now I want to be a TikToker. Not everybody, but I'm saying what happens when you get the content bug is you're like, oh my God, look at this. 14 women in Nebraska like my podcast. I got to focus on Nebraska now. Like it's just the nature of it.
Well, and I think what you're saying is some people get either they're chasing views or they're chasing the shiny new object, and they forget the connection point that you talked about. Is there a call to action? It doesn't have to be a hard call to action about your firm or whatever, but there has to be something that starts to create that connection that either that person is going to come back because they want to have more content, or back to your, I hadn't really thought about what I want to do in retirement. That's got me thinking, maybe I need to talk to someone. There's got to be that connection.
And that's why I
see a lot of content doesn't. It's
she
just
said
fluff.
marketing, right? Because that's the same thing with marketing. Yeah. You can't just put a commercial to be fluff. There needs to be call to action messaging. I think one of the biggest problems with content is the roles switch so much. So 20 years ago, I was in a film production studio, and making content was really expensive, okay? Distribution points actually weren't that expensive. What has happened now, everybody with a phone can make content, but not everybody with a phone wants to watch said content. So all the money actually has to go into either being so much better than everybody else or buying the eyeballs. I can't tell you how many people I meet with, they're like, oh no, we're not going to do radio. We're going to make a video. I'm like, who's going to watch your video? Who do you think? How are you going to find the people? Oh, we'll send it to our email blast. So you're finding the same customers you've already had. So when they think through it, they go, oh my God, why would we make a video? So part of the problem is the distribution mechanisms to get them in people's hands. And probably because Facebook and Google have got a monopoly on those eyeballs and views and the attention spans, that they purposely make it expensive to benefit them. As to where it used to be, make good content, put it out, people will find it. That world has changed very quickly. Very quickly. All right. So the question I have for capital investment advisors, I think will get us going. So you walked in, let's take you back 18 months ago, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Let's take you back 18 months ago. When you got in there and you started walking around and seeing the hallways and starting to see this content, how long did it take you to realize, okay, this place is a little bit different? And where was your formulation of what this marketing plan is going to look like? Was it adapting? Did you have an end vision 3 weeks in there? You're like, I know what I got to get to. I just got to figure out how to get there.
Yes. Well, first walking through the hallways, I was very impressed because I could tell it was a very different place. It was had a very family friendliness to it, and you could tell that the advisors really cared about the families they served. And so that's just different, I think, when you think of, any type of financial role.
Yeah.
And I felt that immediately. And then the content blew me away. I think that's one of the reasons I even took the job. Just meeting Wes, meeting his content team, seeing how good it was. But it was pretty easy, just because I'd been in marketing for so long, to walk around and say, oh, well, what they don't have is media strategy. So we had all of this content, no media strategy, and we didn't have that research. And we just talked about research. We had the research of knowing who our current families were, but we needed to do more research.
Yeah.
So we conducted some research studies, and Wes Moss always calls our families the millionaires next door, because these are the unassuming people who have, over time saved up $1 million or so, and they're investing with us, and they're frugal, and, they...
pensions from their own companies, worked hard. The opposite of what you perceive the millionaire is today.
Exactly.
Today, it's you made your money in crypto, you bought a Rolex and a Lamborghini, and they think that you're wealthy.
Right.
Until Thursday.
And they were not splurging on, crazy luxury. They were, vacationing and just enjoying their time. Well, just doing that research of understanding, well, as people age, and I hate to even say it because I'm in this group that's aging, getting closer to retirement, what's our next audience? And we're calling them the modern millionaire next door. And these are the people who are me. And so I am very comfortable with technology, the way that I interact. And we are willing to splurge if it is worth the value.
Yeah. Your perceived value, which is different from person to person, but you have to understand what those value propositions are for that customer base and that generation, because even I'm going to throw the air quotes, I'm a millennial. Right, but I'm the elderly millennial, so what I have in common with the youngest millennial is almost nothing.
Right.
So if you're just going to look at millennials as a group and say they do the same things, that's not even close to true. Right. I came up and saw the recession of 2007. A young millennial was 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old. They had no idea what happened. So you have to, the data sets in which you're looking at have shrunk to where you have to actually see impact in.
Right. So they may be in the same generation, but they have different mindsets because of what they've seen.
The experience. Yeah, my summer before my senior year in college, I worked at what is now Raymond James. It was Interstate Johnson Lane, and so I got to know all the brokers, the advisors. I actually did the Series 7 training, and then October of that fall was Black Monday. So essentially, it sets an experience in your mind about seeing all these people and all this wealth just basically go away in one day.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that research was very important to have that, to understand not only who we were working with, but who is our next group of people who are going to be seeking retirement, and then just understanding as well the life catalysts that drove them through our doors.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I like to say our sweet spot is somewhere between 50 and 65, and you have something major that happens in your life that makes you realize, I probably should speak to an advisor.
Right.
So maybe you're an empty nester. Maybe you got that last kid out of college and you're thinking about downsizing
Something
your
happened
home.
to your parents. You just got a whirlwind of inheritance, which is going to be the biggest passive wealth ever. The baby boomers passing down to their kids will be the biggest exchange of wealth in history.
You get divorced, you're widowed. There are these life catalysts. So it was a mindset understanding. So that was a big part of it. And then just taking all of that knowledge and putting it into digital. And we completely revamped our website. We had this amazing content. So we wanted to have one place that everybody could have all of this content, made it stickier, and then finding people and driving them. And then I think the big, thing that we're trying to learn now is how long is that consumer journey? Because, we are having people come in and trust us with, all with their money and helping advise them on it. It's not a, hey, I'm going to go buy a Coke consumer journey. It is, I want to think about this a long period of time. So we're figuring that out now. We had people that would call in from after listening to Wes and said, I've been listening to Wes Moss on the radio for 8 years. I'm ready to talk to an advisor. So we're trying to figure out what is that length of time in digital.
Right. So what did maybe some learnings you found about the other markets that, was it length of time? Was it, just tactics and strategy? What are you learning about how to really make, the same success that was built here over 30 years into these other markets?
So we're working on that now. And, the big thing is you can't reproduce a radio show that's been in this market almost 30 years. You just can't do that because you have the brand recognition here and, this is our home. But we're trying to figure that out in our second homes. And while we want to have a consistent brand, we're also trying to figure out what are the little things that are very local that make these different markets tick. So for an example, we do a lot with Clark Howard. So Wes is on his podcast often. We do some media buys with them. So our question is, are there influencers in these other markets that talk about, either consumer behavior or finances that we can partner with that really relate and resonate with these different
The
markets?
problem becomes that in this market, it is part of content. Okay, those relationships don't just grow on trees. Every person on earth wants to be part of the content. You have the trust here in building with the relationship over years. So it is the barrier to entry is incredibly high to be able to do that. As somebody who does this for a living and been around these circumstances, we talk about somebody like Ray Giudice, one of my favorite people. He was a DUI attorney, and his shtick was, he was actually a CAN guy. He worked, so he gave his phone number on the phone, and that was his shtick. And he honestly always answered his phone. And luckily, I stayed out of trouble. I knew a couple people that needed help, and he answered his phone at 4 o'clock in the morning. He always answered his phone. That was his shtick, right? But he was so good at content that we gave him abilities to do things that we wouldn't to someone who was paying. So you can't go buy your way into those opportunities. If you could, now that being said, if you want to just go to magazine because they'll give you whatever you want for advertorial. But what I'm saying is that everyone wants that. Right, it is the number one commodity that takes people and changes behavioral patterns by being part of the content to which they absorb. Everybody wants to do that. Everyone wants content integration. You cannot go to another market and buy your way into it, even if you say, "I know Clark Howard," because in Dallas, I don't care who he is. Who cares?
Right.
It doesn't work that way.
Right.
So,
well, it's going back to your research, right? And then I think the other piece probably you're trying to figure out is what is the brand? Is it Capital or is it an advisor in Phoenix that's been there for 14 years?
Our brand is definitely Capital Investment Advisors. And yes, the advisors carry our brand, but I say that's a lot like we behaved in SunTrust. We had mortgage people all over the country, but they definitely were representing the SunTrust brand. And so that's how we're making sure that it goes out that way. And plus, these, most of our offices haven't been around for 14 years. Right. They're new. So that's what we're trying to do. And you're right, we can't buy our way in to the content. One good thing is our content is so good that we do have national stages. So, we are publishing in Forbes and places like that help us. But we are definitely working on how do we localize this outside of Atlanta.
Yeah, I love it. I think one of the things that's, Mercedes-Benz, everyone loves last click attribution, but nobody buys Mercedes-Benz because they saw a banner ad. They buy Mercedes-Benz because since the time they were 15 years old and first loved cars, they've been getting aspirationally marketed to of I want a Mercedes-Benz.
Absolutely.
So when you talk about last click attribution at the bottom of the funnel, yes, it is imperative. It's how business owns. It's ROI. It's all that stuff. But if you're not planting those seeds over the whole time of that journey, then you're just going to let BMW pass you by, and that happens often. So on that note, we had our conversation about aspirational purchases and journey. So you've been listening to the Marketing Madman on Extra 106.3, and we'll be right back.